Industry under pressure. Innovation in its finest hour. This is the Oil and Gas Technology Podcast, where sharp minds reveal the brilliance and sheer determination turning great ideas into new realities. Hear about how it happens in real life with your host, Michael O'Sullivan.
The views of the host are expressly his own and should not be construed as the views of any other corporation, consortium, governing body, or interplanetary federation.
Right, I am looking out my window here at the spectacular Hilton Americas, beautiful downtown Houston. The sun is the setting sun is reflecting off of our very glassy buildings. We have a lot of glass on the buildings here, and I'm here because yesterday and today we've been at the Rockwell Automation Fair, which is taking place here at the George R. Brown Convention Center. If you're in the oil and gas industry and you've ever been to any sort of industry event in Houston, I'm sure that you have been to the George R. Brown or the GRB, as we like to say. Now, if you're not at Automation Fair right now, which is a fantastic event, then you are missing out on not only is it a sunny sky with just a few clouds drifting by, but it is a balmy 77 degrees here in Houston on November 10th in 2021. So for those of you cold weather friends, this right now, this is it. October, November, Houston, Texas is the place to be for the good weather. The rest of the year, we get the same thing later in the spring. But anyway, I am here. Why am I here? Oh, yeah. So, and you're probably wondering, but you live in Houston. Why would you be staying at the hotel for this event? And the answer is very simple. If you haven't spent a lot of time around Houston, then what you might not know is that it's big, like in terms of miles. If you live in the Houston suburbs, you can easily be 20, 30, 40 miles outside of downtown. And as you know, you know how the schedule goes when you're at a conference, and there's things to do early in the morning and late at night. And anyway, it's a lot. It's kind of a tradition for for a lot of local folks to go ahead and get a hotel right there by right next to the convention center. Just makes things a lot more convenient. So thanks to our friends at Rockwell for putting on this event and having both me and also Mark LaCour. You might have heard of that guy. He runs around OGGN here, and we're moderating panels for this event. And I did mine this morning, actually. The Chemicals Industry Forum was a 2-hour panel. Fantastic, excellent. The panelists were great. The content was really great. The moderator did manage not to ruin the whole thing, and Mark is doing his tomorrow. So if you are, well, what am I saying? You're not gonna hear this till next week. So if you missed it, that's what I'm trying to say. If you missed it, I believe that there's going to be on-demand access. I think you have to go online, register, but you just look for Rockwell Automation Fair and you can register, and you can we can take a vote. Maybe Mark and I will have a contest to see who is the most the fairest of them all in the world of panel moderation. Anyway, there is a connection to the episode today, and I mean, apart from the fact that this is where I happen to be right at this moment, and so I thought I should talk about it, but there is a connection because as we were walking around earlier today, we were walking around the exhibit hall, which was quite large and quite a lot of people. It's really great to see so many people out and about again. And we stumbled on one of the booths from our friends over there at Stratus Technologies, and lo and behold, in the Stratus Technologies booth, we did run into one of our great OGGN friends and supporters. He's a guy who always is ready to step in whenever we need somebody smart to talk about something interesting, and that is exactly what is happening in this episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the OGGN Spotlight, Mr. Corey Alemán. And that does bring us to our guest today. I am sitting here. This is a special day, actually, because I do have Corey Alemán.
Yes.
Did I say it right? Remember the very first time that? So here's the story: is Corey was you? I don't know if you remember this, but you were the first guest that I had when I took over the tech show from Mark LaCour when he was doing it before. You were the very first one. Remember, Mark and I kind of did it together.
Yes.
Yeah. And you were teaching me how to say your name correctly on that one. So that was a year ago, actually. That was a little more than a year ago. So all right, so back to who Corey is. So Corey is like the head guy for oil and gas for Stratus Technologies.
Yes, sir.
Correct? I don't know if that's what it says on your business card, but I know like you're the head honcho when it comes to the oil and gas industry at Stratus.
Yes, I'm the global leader for oil and gas at Stratus Technologies. Yes.
Global leader. So what does that mean to be the global leader?
I used to book a lot of air miles.
Well, you told me before, you said you're going to Abu Dhabi this week.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, actually, Friday.
Friday, which is in Abu Dhabi. Is that still this week or is that next week?
Well, I don't know. I don't get there until Saturday night, basically Sunday morning, so I guess it's next week.
Okay. Right. Well, and plus we had the daylight savings ended the other day, and now I don't know what time it is half the time anymore. So, Stratus. So we have some interesting stuff today. We're going to talk about kind of like a little edge compute smorgasbord that we're going to go through, but before that, so tell us about Stratus. So we get that part out.
So Stratus Technologies, basically been in the compute business for 40 years. Started in data center.
40 years. You should say that part slower because there's not too many companies that have could say 40 years. So you got to give that time to sink in.
Spin off as a computer data center kind of provider back in the late 80s. Basically, most of the business for the first 30 plus years was banking, finance, data center, telecommunications, media, anything where the data has to be there, always on, always available, is where Stratus kind of core products really cut their teeth. And the business grew from there. Now we're actually in industrial automation. We're touching compute. Our edge devices do go down to capable of being installed in a cabinet, but they're still not your basic edge compute because it's still an edge server. Our computers go down to about 2 terabytes, but that's like the base level. So if you're looking for a small IPC, that's probably not us, but we do a lot of dynamic things with the edge and the edge servers. Bringing things from the data center that used to be related to redundancy and virtualization, and actually bringing that all the way out to the industrial edge, whether it's used on a machine or in a cabinet to collect real-time data, process data, depending on what the job may be.
Gotcha. Okay, right. I mean, I knew that already, but now everybody else knows that. So the reason why I know that is because Corey's a great friend of OGGN, Stratus also, and you've been on several. You're always willing to show up and be on a panel whenever. Even though the last one I
showed up and you didn't.
I made you come join the panel, and then I wasn't there because I had that little bug that's been going around here the last 20 months or so. So today, so you mentioned edge. Edge is a big topic right now, and at the risk of having too many episodes talking about edge computing, I think this one's interesting because, so we were talking earlier and you said that you have a customer who's, and I know we probably can't talk about names or whatever, but somebody's doing something pretty interesting right now, like actually doing it at the
truly
edge, right?
The integration of machine learning, artificial intelligence happening on a skid in the middle of nowhere, where measurements are being taken, put into an application, and then run into a couple of different functions, and the correct values are being readjusted, for a real-time application, removing H2S content from gas flow. Basically in that application, you've got huge variables in gas flow as well as H2S content. You've got a base material that needs to be combined with the gas in the H2S, and then an agent, and then the amount of agent depends on the amount of H2S. So obviously all this stuff is being measured in real time. Used to be the job of someone to sit on site and look at those measurements coming in and determine how much agent needed to be put into the reaction. That's all being done autonomously now.
Right. Okay, so we'll back up just a little bit. First of all, I was kind of embarrassed to ask you this before, but H2S is
hydrogen
what?
sulfide. Very, very, very deadly gas.
We don't want that.
Basically every reservoir around the world. Just depends on the level of content, depending on how you have to deal with it.
Yeah. So the gas is coming out, and the H2S has to be removed. So this is a standard operation, right? Like people have been doing this.
Right. It's a very standard application. It's done around the world. There are a few different ways to do it. This type of application has come a common application that's been used for a long time, and like I say, it used to be very kind of manually administered and monitored. So as you can imagine, not very cost effective. Having to have someone always on site managing it, making adjustments. And if you didn't make your adjustments in the right time, you fouled the agent, which means you had to shut down. So the client is required for a certain uptime and availability of the skid. So basically, it used to be a 24/7 manned operation, and through the use of our edge servers, because we bring redundancy and virtualization to the edge on their skid, they've got multiple computers talking to each other, running this application, talking to the on-site historian, and basically performing the operation as the data comes in real time, feeding it into those scripting algorithms, and then the algorithms turn around and feed back to the controller what adjustments to make for the process to remain operational.
So okay. And this is good, right? Because we, especially in all of this digital transformation stuff that everybody's trying to do, like autonomous operations is one of those things that, whenever people talk about digital transformation and why we want to do it, automation always is one of the sort of generic objectives, along with, what are the other ones? It's always automation and like decision making and optimization,
speed of
like
decision making,
it's in that laundry list, right?
Remove people from hazardous locations. I mean, all these things are important
get people
to
out
the
of the red
industry
zone
as a whole.
Right.
As we move to to becoming a bigger and better deal. To put it kind of straight, the BBD thing. How do we get better at what we're doing today, and how do we become safer at what we're doing today? And I think this accomplishes two things. It makes the skidded unit more efficient because you don't have the cost overhead of the 24/7 manned operation, but also you're removing an individual from an application that has a deadly gas involved.
Yeah, which is always good. I was just thinking about how many family members would probably like to have certain individuals in the family removed from something that has a deadly gas involved, but I don't know if there's an automation solution for that. Exactly.
The autonomous algorithm that makes that happen.
There has to be somebody's working on that somewhere. I'm certain, but no, but my point is that a lot of times we talk about these benefits, like you just said, we sort of talk about them in the abstract because we sort of sum it all up and say, well, if we can do these kinds of things with analytics and real-time data and then we will be able to reap the benefits of things like, remote control and autonomous operations and getting people at blah, 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 all that stuff, right? But here's a case where we've moved beyond the abstract, right? And this is a real operation that you have to get it. This isn't a proof of concept.
This is happening today in practice and functioning, and our customer has been able to reduce their overhead costs, so their customer benefits at the end of the day, as well as they've exceeded their contracted uptime and availability for the skids. So I mean, we're helping them become more successful, and then but in turn they're helping their customers' operations to stay up and running. So and it's what's really cool about it is we've been talking about, like you said, in abstract for a number of years, but this is it. This is letting the computers do the math stuff, because this is all math based in physics. I mean, it's certain reagents based on certain levels of content, and so let the computers do the math problems, because they can do it faster and more accurately than we can, and push the button and let it go.
And it's cool because it's a real time operation, right? So it's not like let the computers do the math stuff on like figuring out where the oil is, right? Which is sort of like this, which can happen today or tomorrow or in the next 5 years, and we can run it 5 different ways, and all that stuff is fascinating too. But this is a real time operation where the computers. So there's a lot of things that had to happen for this, right? So because I want to talk about what did it take to actually implement such a miracle of modern science, and not only the technical implications, but somebody had to let go of the steering wheel, right, and trust that it was going to be right. So how did they get from not having this thing to not only having it and it works, but being able to back away from it and let it run?
Well, I think there's a bunch of things to unpack in that statement. I think there's a
don't tell me it took 3 years.
It did not,
because that just wipes out the whole story.
It surprisingly happened within less than a year. So in a matter of months.
Okay, well, that's good.
They were able to take this vision, and once the customer understood what was available in the market from a compute perspective, they were already trying to tackle this issue on their own, and looking at what solutions were available to make this happen. And we got introduced to them through a third party, and once we started having conversations about what they wanted to do and where they wanted to go, and understanding how we could support them from a platform perspective, they did several months of lab testing, and then several months of field testing with personnel on site. And they already had a lot of the software piece tackled. And it was just a matter of really being able to find the right provider to give them the edge solution with the availability and support that they felt like they needed in order to meet their uptime requirements for their SLAs.
Yeah. So they, so this was an initiative that they had. Did they develop it all in house? So? Whew.
It was that.
So now they got to maintain it. Thank God they have good hardware.
So I think it's always fun to meet the kind of guys that have this vision, and this gentleman is no exception to that rule. Had an idea, knew he could figure out a way to make it work, but didn't know how, and had the right amount of data scientists and programmers and script writers available to him in his organization, and they basically said, okay, we can make this happen, and they did.
Okay, all right, so, but as we all know, there's a big difference between making something like that work in the lab, so to speak, and architecting it and making it work in the real world, where you have lots of things to consider, right? Like, how are you going to, and they have it running in just one place, or they have it running in multiple
locations in West Texas.
Okay, so it's hard to call West Texas one place, but like multiple locations.
Part of their challenge is they tried to develop this as something that they could run remotely across the network into their control center. But the environment, right, and a lot of folks are familiar with the West Texas landscape. You can't always get 4G or even LGE. You may struggle to get a cell service anywhere.
Right, you may have to just put like a big, huge spool of Cat 5 in the back of your pickup and just drive down the road with it and let it out as you go. So
communications challenges actually drove them to think about how to make this happen at the edge in a contained environment.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to get to is because not to take anything away from the data scientists and the script geniuses, but writing those algorithms is really just one piece of it, right? Like, how do I? And if I'm the IT person or whoever's in charge of all that, right? Like, you see these projects come along and people say, look at this wonderful thing that we created. And then I look at it and I go, well, this is great. How am I supposed to deploy it, secure it, operate it, support it, right? All of that. So, and now you're talking about the edge. So it gets into that big question of, what to do in the cloud versus what to do at the edge. I mean, it's presumably they got to take this. I mean, the data is well, actually, that's a question I should ask you. So the magic box is reading the data and then saying, like this doesn't smell right, and adjust the stuff to right. Is that just a self-contained operation, or is that data useful elsewhere? And now we're talking about connecting to the cloud to get it into something else, and they want to run analytics on it, or what's the scope there?
Because we're providing our edge server at the end, we're running virtualization on the edge. So at the edge, they run their homegrown application, they run their SCADA application, and then in a separate virtual machine, they have an on-site historian. So between those three applications, using three virtual machines to run in our environment, that historian is synced across the cloud back to a historian at the control center. Right.
It has to be, right? Because you already need
everything that happens on site is logged in the on-site historian, and when communication networks allow, they use the cloud to bring all that historian data back and sync it into historian data, a historian at the control center, and then they actually run further scripting on the historical data to begin to build asset profiles and preventive maintenance and other things like that. So it really is a true edge cloud convergence to allow them to be able to perform these applications at the edge, but then to be able to bring it all back into the control center to be able to monitor and understand what's happening in the environment.
That's all the rage now, right? Is we don't want to just leave that data in the historian. We want to do things with it so that we can improve.
And that's what they're using the cloud for, to bring all that stuff back. So so it really is the edge and cloud as a combined asset to perform some, really cool stuff when it comes to autonomous operation.
Right. But what they're not trying to do is send all the data back to the cloud. So the processing that's needed to adjust to remove the H2S from the gas stream, right? Like they're not going to try to do that.
That would be problematic because if you have too much reagent or not enough reagent, depending on the content of H2S, you can foul the whole application and basically would have to shut down the skid. So because they can't have communications outages or lost links when they want to make these adjustments, it has to be done on site. So therefore, the application runs automatically on site. Having that data run through the cloud and relying on either someone at the control center to make those adjustments or to be able to try to run the autonomous application in the cloud environment could cause problems where they would actually have more shutdowns and maybe more downtime than would be accepted.
And we know the industry loves downtime. That's our
unplanned downtime, the bane of everyone's existence, right?
It's more expensive than people. So there's a little bit of a pattern there. So I have a background way back when I was involved with software teams back before they had all the cool toys that they do now that allow you to build applications in 5 minutes. We had these things called design patterns, and it was sort of like, okay, certain types of problems can be solved in consistent ways, and this is how you do it. And so what you're describing there is kind of a pattern for, okay, if whatever the thing is, if it's critical to the operation at hand, then you want to be able to do that on site, right? You may also, or you want to at least have the option for doing it on site. But if the operation is something that you're going to use for a future purpose, or it feeds some other thing or what have you, then your tolerance for breaking communications is different. Then you just want to be able to preserve what's happening on site and sync it up later. Right? Is that kind of that's the decision making process for all these things?
Yeah, I think when you think about and go back to the criticalness of the application, right? If this thing stops working, are we able to operate? And if the answer is yes, then
right.
Okay, well, we're good. If the answer is no, then you need to do everything you can to make sure that application continues to operate at the edge. And
yeah. Well, there's a sub question. If the answer is no, then the sub question is, does it matter? Right. It's possible that if it stops operating, it doesn't matter.
For it, right? Isn't that the next question in the decision tree?
That's right. Well, and I'm just getting into this because there's so much discussion about doing everything. I think there's not too many people now who are pushing the idea of, well, you can just do everything in the cloud, because even the major cloud providers, the major public cloud providers, are now bringing on-site edge, infrastructure kind of solutions into their game plan.
But I think as we begin to do more with these types of applications, having them operate in the cloud does pose a little bit of a challenge, right? So like I said, if that thing's in the cloud and you lose a communications link, can you still operate? If you can't, then let's get that running on the edge and make sure that it's resilient enough to run on the edge. Right. And that you can still conduct your applications. Connectivity to the cloud is wonderful, and there's a whole lot of things you can do with that data down the road, but being able to collect it in real time and have it, and always have it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And does it all need to be in the cloud, or what needs to be in the cloud, what doesn't need to be a cloud, and what type of cloud service are you available to, depending on what part of the world you're located in, and what are the communications challenges, and all that kind of stuff comes into play, right?
Yeah. Now there's some other stuff too, right? There's some considerations. By the way, I meant to ask you before. I'm just curious. So this customer, had they already virtualized the SCADA and the historian, or was that sort of part of this effort? Because that's a big thing right there, virtualizing that stuff. So
right? We had done some work with them previously, but yes, so they were running the SCADA in a virtual environment. Their intent was, that was part of the project. They wanted to move the SCADA to the edge. So being able to run it in a virtual environment was going to be the way to go, to be able to have the redundancy they needed at the edge. So the pieces kind of all lined up with what their intentions were to do and how they wanted to progress as a business, and what we were able to do from a support perspective.
Yeah, because this is an important point, right? Is there's a lot of people who want in these industrial, these ICS type environments, right? Which is what we now call the edge. But the point is that these are environments where there have been computers out there doing stuff for a long time, right? Generating data and doing stuff with that data. But if those systems are still running on the old infrastructure, right, where this application or this process control system has to run on that computer right there because it's the only one that has like the serial bus on the back, connector on the back of it that feeds the right, or whatever, all those scenarios. Like you have to like virtualization of all of that stuff is a step toward, if you want to do this fancy stuff like this customer's doing, where you get this really cool autonomous operation. You're not going to be able to do, like, it doesn't matter how good they are with the scripting and the data science and everything if your process control systems are still running the old way. Or am I exaggerating this, or this is my understanding, right? Like it all needs to get
right. So they still have a
modernized.
controller. They have an on-site controller, taking the valve positions and looking at the measurements. All that's still fed into a PLC, and then that PLC ties into the SCADA network. So there's, from a controls perspective, that's not really a new architecture or a big change, but putting the SCADA in the virtual environment was a little bit different, right? That's more of a new thing,
But you need that in order to do this other stuff.
I mean, it does enable you to do more, right? So, if your intention is to do more,
carefully worded. That's very, very good. It helps to do. I had this. I think you know this. Like, I grew up in the consulting world, right? Like, professionally, I grew up. And one of the first things that I learned when I got to be experienced enough that they would let me write, proposals and or statements of work or whatever, things like that, was you would say, and by doing this, it will enable this. And they always insert the no, helps to enable, right? Or helps to deliver, or helps to, like, the word help suddenly appeared in everything. It never did it for sure, but it will help to. So, all right, this gets into another thing, though, right? Which comes up over and over again. And at the risk of talking about it too much, the security thing is still a big thing, right? Especially in these environments. And everybody, vendors and commentators and pundits and everybody are swarming around this cybersecurity thing. In fact, tomorrow or Wednesday, we're just talking about this. I'm going to be moderating the panel at the Chemical Forum for Rockwell, and like, cybersecurity is one of the things that we have to talk about. Everybody wants to insert cybersecurity into the discussion. But you said something interesting when we were chatting before about people. Well, actually, let me back up. A little bit of history. How did we get to? Because I feel like people don't talk about this enough. How did we get to caring so much about cybersecurity in these environments? I mean, it's kind of a new thing, and how did that happen?
It's a new thing, but really, it's not a new thing. I mean, if you go back, the one that I think is the first real event that a lot of people will recall or maybe know something about was the Stuxnet virus. That was 2010. So that was the first real industrial automation.
2010. That's just like a couple years ago, right?
That's not right?
Long. I can't. Yeah, right. 11. All right, fine. So recap that a little bit for those who were still like playing Super Mario during that time. What was the
Stuxnet virus was a virus crafted to affect a particular piece of equipment that was operating. It was actually a centrifuge, and it was designed to mask the real readings from the centrifuge and allow the operator to overspeed the centrifuge without knowing, basically accepting the command to run and then taking that run command and multiplying it by some variable, and then feeding back the data to the controller saying that, hey, we're all good here and nothing's going on.
And why would somebody want to do this? Is this just a prank? Like, why would somebody want to do this?
I mean, this was intended to destroy a particular brand of centrifuge that was used in a particular part of the world, in an area where they were working on radioactive.
It's all becoming
stuff.
Clear now. Right. This wasn't like a high school chemistry class, right? No.
So, but what it taught us is, industrial cybersecurity systems, one, are vulnerable, and two, it's not that complex to confuse the readings and change, basically mask what's going into the unit, mask what's coming out of the unit, and you end up destroying the equipment. And it was this virus that existed in all over the world, but it only had one target and it only had one purpose. But it was found all over the world, and at that time, how many people were, all the systems were air-gapped. So this operation system that this virus found its way into was never connected to the internet, was never connected to a network. It was completely an air-gapped system. It was a complete automation SCADA system that was not tied to anything outside of SCADA. And so what the example is, the learning, I guess, should be, is that, no matter if you think you're safe because you're not connected to anything, the air gap theory has been disproved because it was either malicious hardware on someone's laptop when they plugged in to do some work on a control system, or a USB
Right.
someone plugged in to download a file to put something into the control system, one way, shape, or form, this thing made it through the air gap and infected this system and caused, lots of damage.
Yeah, wasn't that when a lot of the big companies started like jamming screwdrivers into USB ports on all their
That's
PCs
when
and their
everybody started
offices,
locking
right?
down
Yeah.
USB ports and making them. Yes, you have
Yeah.
to. All
Yeah.
unused ports have to be locked in the BIOS and all this good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I remember that. So, so the screwdriver method I thought was faster, but so this is interesting because a lot of times when we talk about cybersecurity in these industrial environments, the sort of the regular kind of refrain is, well, this didn't used to be so much of a concern before we started connecting everything to a net, right? Before we started connecting things, this drive for connectedness, and because we want to get the data from everywhere and use it for everything, there's some amount of like, the war between the IT people and the OT people involves the OT people saying, no, this is why we never used to connect to this stuff to the WAN or to the internet or to what, right? Because it creates all these new risks, which I think that does create new risks. But
Yeah, I think the expansion of the network is actually what we're talking about. The expansion of the control network to include advanced computing, to be able to use things like AI and ML, absolutely are going to open up the environment to the potential for cyber events. Having data in the cloud, having connected assets. All these things on the compute
Right.
platform could cause potential problems. And I think, understanding that, yes, we are expanding the network infrastructure, and having that at top of mind as we think about, as we expand and open ourselves up to risk, what are we doing to mitigate that risk? There's all kinds of stuff you can do. And I think just so long as everyone understands that it is a challenge, it is something we need to be aware of, and it is something you need to be, basically have built into every budget that you have. How are you going to protect your system from this stuff?
right.
But there's all kinds of applications and ways to do it, so I think it's a very fascinating topic, and looking at the most recent one that make the headlines from an oil and gas perspective, I would say, is Colonial, and looking at what happened there and how was their network affected, and what was interesting, the operations network was still kind of disconnected from the IT network, but there were a couple of applications that were fed by OT data when it came to like ticketing and that kind of stuff. These are just one or two applications is all it takes to say that network is connected to this. And if we got to shut that one down, then we better protect ourselves by shutting the other one down, right?
Shut the other one down, yeah. So this is interesting because what's really interesting, and I hadn't really thought about the Stuxnet thing, because there are, going back to the whole war between, I think we're getting past this, but the idea that, okay, this is a bad idea to connect all these industrial systems in these new ways that we're connecting them because it creates all these vulnerabilities. Really what you're saying is that Stuxnet had already proven that this was a problem we needed to solve anyway.
100%.
Right? So it's no good to stand back and go, all right, all these fancy digital transformation benefits aren't worth it because we're creating too much security risk over here. The risk was already there. So with or without your fancy digital transformation stuff, this risk still needs to be addressed. Is really what that. And I hadn't thought of that. It's a great insight because we've been so focused on people, arguing about the risk versus the benefit of the risk.
I'm just wondering, was the guys arguing about the risk versus the benefit the same ones that were shoving the screwdrivers in the USB port?
In the USB ports, they were the exact same. In fact, they were doing that as we spoke. They were shoving this.
Because really, I think this whole effort has been proven over so many times. I mean, there's several examples that you can point to of customers that are just, seeing, 20% reduction in unplanned downtime.
Yeah, it's huge.
20% reduction or 15% reduction in this cost, 8%, 10% reduction in this cost. And this percentage of these costs are, percentages of multiple millions of dollars. So, it's easily justifies itself when you make the transition and understand how these applications will help you optimize your business. But you have to be cognizant of the risk and understand how to plan for the risk and what you're going to do to mitigate that risk, right?
Exactly, and you're right too. I think some of that arguing has more or less gone away, but it certainly was
absolutely.
there at the beginning, and it's just ironic now to look back and go, well, you were kind of arguing over nothing because you had the risk.
I was one of those technicians at one point in my career.
And I know you were.
The communication network never touches the automation network.
Get that stuff.
Why do we have two networks going to this site? Nobody lives there. Oh, because one's for communications and one's for automation.
And one's for yes, and they're air gaps.
That's right.
And
they're isolated. I'm like, wait a second, they pass on the same radio. Don't tell anybody that.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so I have a confession to make, and that is that before we started this, I forgot to start the little timer that tells me how long we've been talking, so I don't know. I feel like it's been about 35 minutes or something like that. So so full transparency to the audience, because I always believe in full transparency most of the time, and I don't know. I think we're at that point where we should wrap up. So
sure.
I feel like it's probably this might be a good time. But before we do that, any other last brilliant kernels of wisdom or anything that you want to, because the thing I think this is really good is what we've really hit on today is it's not just theoretical, right? And I know this isn't the only example, but this is a real life example of how the pain and the cost and the difficulty to get this stuff in place, which happened in various iterations, as you described, now is having real benefit. So as you're looking at that, what other good lessons would you share with folks who are trying to go down the same path?
I think there's all kinds of folks developing, working on applications to do some really wonderful things in the oil and gas space. When you think about emissions control, mitigation of methane, you think about leak detection. There are so many various ways that folks are focused on providing real-time data to solve a lot of the challenges in the oil and gas space. And I think that understanding how these networks connect, how the data moves around, and understanding how to secure that stuff is really going to enable us to take advantage of all these applications that are being developed to just move the industry to the next level, which is what we're always being asked to do. How can you be better tomorrow than you were today?
Yeah. Good. All right. So we'll end on that. That's a good one. I like that. That's good. So, what else? I think that's it. I think that. Oh, so I'll see you this. So you need to come by Wednesday when I'm moderating the chemical forum. I need a heckler in the audience just to liven.
I will try to put that on my calendar.
That would be good. That'd be good to have somebody there. Well, I was going to tell the audience but by the time they hear this, the Rockwell Automation Fair will have passed. So your opportunity is gone. Anyway, Corey Alemán, thank you very much. Always great talking with you. I appreciate you making time.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks, Michael, and the Oil and Gas Global Network. Really enjoy the conversation every time we have it. So looking forward to the next time.
So we'll just keep having it. All right. Very good.
Take care.
Thanks. Well, there you go, folks. Corey Alemán from Stratus Technologies. I always love talking with Corey about what's going on in the industry, even when we're not on a podcast or in a panel. Because, by the way, Corey's also not a bad guy to just hang out with, have a couple beers. But he's been in the industry for a long time. He's done a lot of the things himself, and now he's working with a lot of customers. He has some great insights. So that's it. That's going to wrap it up for today. Don't forget that the Oil and Gas Global Network is the largest and most listened to network of podcasts for the oil and energy industry, which means that if you like this one, we probably have another one that you like. You probably ought to check out, if you haven't already, check out my, I guess like we call it my sister show, the Oil and Gas Digital Doers podcast, which is where we look at technology as well, but we focus a little less on the tech and a little bit more on what people are actually doing and how they're getting business value. And I don't know, you know what? The subjects cross over a lot. Really, it's just a reason for me to put out 2 episodes a week instead of 1. But if you like this one, check that one out. If you like these, go to oggn.com and learn about all the other great programs that we have. And that is really going to wrap it up for today. That's all I wanted to say. So remember, when you go out there, when you're walking around, whatever your next industry event is, and there's always that one person, right? There's always that person that's out there, talking about how oil and gas is behind the times and slow to adopt and blah, 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 all that stuff. Well, you've heard me give the speech. You got to find that person, you got to set them straight, and you got to teach them about the reality that right here in this old-fashioned industry, we were tech before tech was cool.
Check us out next week for another entertaining and yet useful episode of Oil and Gas Tech Podcast, a production of the Oil and Gas Global Network. Learn more at oggn.com.